You can come with me, yeah. Pointing to my home away from home,
Today is World AIDS Day. It is the 22nd anniversary of World AIDS Day in the world, because it's World AIDS Day. Here in Maine, this event today is being held here in Maine to kind of do a few things. First of all, honor those that have passed with the disease and that continue to struggle, not only here in our state, but also nationwide and across the world, across our planet. The second thing to do is we're here to show the public on this day, but to also bring a message throughout all of the days of the year that HIV is still very much present in our lives, in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, that HIV is still here more than 25 years after the fight began, after the first cases of HIV showed up in Maine. It's still very much with us. And the third thing we're here to do today is to renew our pledge in the fight against HIV, to say we will continue and that we will not settle for mediocrity in the face of HIV, that we will continue to push forward. A couple little interesting things on this World AIDS Day. There are 1,300 people in the state of Maine diagnosed as living with HIV today. I think that number is a little more than 1,300 at this point. That's more than ever before in the history of the state. More people are living with HIV than ever before in Maine. It's also estimated that there's 300 to 500 individuals living with HIV in the state of Maine, but are unaware of their positive status. And as we know, if someone's unaware of their status, they could potentially be spreading the disease to other people. So that's a real sobering kind of fact here today. The second thing that I think is really important to acknowledge today is in the past decade, 10 years ago, we had less people dying from HIV than we do in 2009. In 1999, fewer people died from HIV-related causes than in 2009. We've had incredible advances in medicine that have been really life-saving for a lot of us. But the fact of the matter is that HIV is still a disease that takes lives, and that we must continue to prevent the spread of HIV, but also to invest in technologies and medicines that will allow us to lead to healthier lives and more productive lives for those that are infected with HIV. And the third thing that I wanted to point out before we really get our program started is that there are more people becoming infected with HIV in the state of Maine today than there were 10 years ago. We are seeing, in 1998, we saw 32, I think, now I'm going to be quoted on this, between 30 and 35, I know that's safe, infections in 1998. Last year, we saw over 40 infections, and the year before that, in 2007, we saw over 50 new infections in the state. HIV is still here, and that's why we're here today. We're here to acknowledge the history of this disease and those that it has affected, the family members, the friends, and the individuals themselves. We're here to acknowledge that the public needs to know about HIV and needs to keep being reminded about HIV and AIDS in this state. And third, we're here today to say that we will continue to move forward with medical advancements, be them treatment or vaccines, that we will continue to move forward with HIV prevention and care, and we will continue until this disease is no longer, until World AIDS Day isn't needed anymore, until it's literally history.
According to the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the greatest cause of AIDS is ignorance. When people seek to perpetuate ignorance, We must bring morality into the picture. If young people learn about condoms, they will have more sex. We know that is not true. Gay sex will be taught in our schools as though there were some intimate activity that homosexuals do that heterosexuals don't, when we know exactly the opposite is true. A world religious leader makes a statement that condoms increase the spread of AIDS, yet we know that is absolutely false. Bishop John Selby Spong wrote, "I will no longer listen to that pious sentimentality that we love the sinner, but hate the sin. That statement is nothing more than a self-serving lie designed to cover the fact that these people hate homosexual persons."
We estimate that about 1,800 people are living with HIV in Maine. Of those 1,800, about 1,400 know their status. This means approximately 400 Mainers are living with HIV and do not know they are infected. These 400 Mainers, therefore, are not able to access critical HIV care services, and we know that early intervention with medical services improves health outcomes for people living with HIV. The majority of new diagnoses, as well as the majority of people living with HIV in Maine, are men. Last year, most new diagnoses were made among individuals over the age of 30, and more than half were over the age of 40. Maine has a strong network of HIV care services for those people living with HIV and AIDS. Medical case management, AIDS drug assistance, and early medical intervention services are provided by the Brian White Treatment Modernization Act. Insurance for many people living with HIV is provided by Maine Care. Close to 2/3 of people diagnosed with HIV and living in Maine access some form of the state-sponsored care.
There was a time when AIDS was remote, when it didn't seem to affect us. It affected some other group of people when we were safe. That time is long gone, and yet it seems that we live with the illusion that it is back. AIDS has touched us personally in every part of this country, in every part of this state, and certainly in every part of the world, and yet we still live as though it were remote. We have seen the entrance of HIV/AIDS into this state, and I believe that I will see the end of it. I believe that with your help, we will see the end of HIV and AIDS in this state and in the world.
Unfortunately, adaptation is a universal trait, a trait that HIV has acquired. Now, even though I consider myself a science nerd, I don't have the skills to talk about the history of how HIV has transformed over the past 20+ years, so I can't go into that. But I do know as HIV transforms and mutates and changes, so must we. We must obtain and implement new and creative ways to tackle this disease through education, advocacy, programs, and treatment.
So, what is the most effective thing that I could possibly say about living with HIV/AIDS? I live as a very out person, I live as an out gay man, and I also live as an out positive person. And why do I choose to do that? I choose to do that in the hopes of reducing the stigma that swirls around HIV/AIDS in the state. If I can do that, if I can normalize this disease, perhaps I can make a difference.
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be part of this. I want to thank you, Andrew. I want to thank the AIDS Alliance. I want to thank all of you for coming forward and standing together, because it is about all of us. And that's what's remarkable about our state. In the most difficult of times, people in our state will extend themselves and provide that kind of safety net for each other and each family. So I want to thank you for your leadership. Everyone engaged in this fight recognize how important this fight is. We are with you in this fight. Maine communities are heavily impacted by AIDS and HIV, and while we've made some important achievements fighting HIV and AIDS, we know we have a long way to go to eradicate the disease. That's why World AIDS Day is so important. We need to focus on our successes, including the many valuable lives that have been saved due to prevention and treatment. But we also must be reminded that more than 1,300 people in Maine have received a diagnosis of HIV/AIDS. Another estimated 300 to 500 people do not know that they have it. But I know with the leadership today that's focused on this event and other events, we're not limited to just drafting bills and organizing events or crafting public policy, but this leadership is showing that it can practice on a very personal level, person to person, whether it's taking the initiative to get tested so you and your loved ones know whether you have the HIV status, or whether it's encouraging your family and friends to think about HIV and its prevention. Open up the dialogue about HIV/AIDS and encourage others to get tested, be safe, and get involved. As you know, Maine is in the grips of a global financial crisis and national economic downturn, and that's why it's more important than ever so that each of us actively get involved in fighting HIV/AIDS. And I want to acknowledge the great work of all of our partners in this effort who are here today, and many other events are being held around the state. We're facing tough choices in Maine about how we can best put those limited resources to work. We'll all have to do some things that we don't want to do. But I am committed to fighting HIV/AIDS, and we'll continue to work with you and our partners to make the best of a very difficult budget situation, because we're in this fight together. And I want to work with you to ensure that we maintain the critical services needed to ensure that Maine beats back HIV/AIDS. This is an important fight for the future of our state, and I want to thank you all for being here today.
By looking up when you need to know.